Alexis also asks, what inspired you to go into the field? Alexis also asks, what inspired you to go into the field? Well, it was a story that I'll tell you, because if you're a young person, you're thinking about, well, you have to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life right now. You may not have to. I mean, my undergraduate degree originally was in radio, television, and film production. Now, you can't tell from the quality of these videos, perhaps, but that was my original profession. And I went to New York City, and I got involved with multimedia and technical theater, and things happened. Actually, it was one of those things, and a lot of people who wind up in chiropractic school, a lot of, especially when I started chiropractic school back in the late 70s, a lot of people started out with a different profession. It was a second profession. I think the oldest person I had in my class she was over 60. She was a retired nun. And we had retired military people. We had people who, from all walks of life, they became chiropractors because a lot of them had positive experiences with chiropractors. They had a problem that had dogged them most of their lives, and then they went to a chiropractor and they got inspired by the chiropractor. With me, it was a little different. My father was sick. He had asthma, he had chronic asthma. He worked in a factory that was aggravating it. And back then, this was in the early 70s, the only things the doctors could really give you were steroids or prednisone. And that was not a good thing. They didn't have the sprays they have now, the cortisone sprays or prednisone sprays that open up your With me, it was a little different. My father was ill. He was probably in his 50s. He worked in a factory. He didn't have a lot of options, especially this was in the early 70s, and there weren't a lot of jobs we had, especially for a 50-year-old, 50-some-year-old whose skills were very narrow. He had this trade, this industrial trade that was actually now, for the most part, it's been automated. But he had asthma. He was in a place where there was a lot of irritating chemicals that were making his asthma worse. And back then, all they had was prednisone to help. And prednisone has some serious side effects. And he was having all the side effects. And I was worried about him. And I happened, in just the course of a conversation, talk to someone. And this person said, well, I think they might have even been talking about homeopathy. But I took it as herbology, and I bought a book on herbology. It's called Back to Eden. It's a classic. And I just basically got this recipe for asthma out of it and brought him all these herbs. And sure enough, it really helped improve. And he didn't need to take this prednisone nearly as often. And his asthma attacks were far and few between. And I thought that was remarkable, and then had a few other experiences using herbology that were very positive. And I had just happened to take a trip out to the West Coast and happened to go into an herb store. I mean, these are things, sometimes it's just serendipity. It puts you in different places at different times. And there was a flyer for a certain kind of a seminar way up in the mountains above Santa Cruz. It's a beautiful place. And I didn't have enough money for this 10-day seminar, but I talked to the people who were putting it on, and we made a deal where I would do work for them in exchange. So I got to experience this entire seminar, part of which was herbology, but part of it was something called polarity therapy, which is a laying on of hands, a type of healing that was based on Indian Ayurvedic medicine that was designed by an osteopath / chiropractor who had moved to India, and he was an American, Dr. Stone. So I studied this out in California. I came back. I was living in New York City at the time because that's where I was working in theater. And I went outside my apartment one day, and there was a flyer, and it was the gentleman who was teaching it out in California. He was actually from New York, and he was doing a one-year program. And I took the one-year program. But as I got more involved in it, Dr. Stone had more and more chiropractic kind of moves in there. So I started getting involved with, interested in that. And I started talking to some chiropractors, and they gave me some books to read. And lo and behold, it was 8 years after I had graduated from college, I went to chiropractic college. I did have to take a physics and a biology class for a year before I went in because I didn't have that as part of my undergraduate work. But and then I went to chiropractic school. So it was a total change of profession. Glad I made it. It's been a great 40 years since I started, and I would recommend it for you. Okay.